in the far edge of the galaxy, where the starlight was cold and faint, a single dot appeared on the Imperial Border Command's sensor screen. At first, no one paid attention. Space was full of stray signals, drifting cargo containers, old satellites, even ghost echoes from long-dead ships. The operators at Station Varan 6 had seen it all before, but this dot was different. It didn't drift. It moved, slowly at first, then with deliberate, precise course changes. Probably another smuggler, muttered Lieutenant Heron, leaning back in his chair. Nothing to worry about. The senior technician, a quiet man named Relvar, frowned. Smugglers don't fly this straight. Look at the trajectory. It's heading directly toward us. The room grew quieter as more officers gathered around the glowing holodisplay. The object's speed was increasing, but the readings were strange. No known Imperial drive signature, no friendly transponder, just something unknown, wrapped in a field that sensors could barely read, far away. Aboard the mysterious vessel, Captain Elias Ward stood at the bridge window, watching the endless starfield slide by. The ship, the Resolute, was a dark, angular shape built for silence. Its engines whispered rather than roared. Its hull absorbed scans like a shadow in space. Distance to the border, Ward asked calmly. 17 light minutes, answered his first officer, Lieutenant Avery. We'll be on their scopes already. Ward gave a faint smile. Good, let them see us. This wasn't a mission of stealth, not today. His orders from Earth Command were clear. Approach Imperial space without hiding, and keep going until someone noticed. What happened after that would depend on the Empire's reaction. Back at Station Varan 6, Relvar double-checked his readings. Sir, I'm getting a gravitational profile I can't match to any known class of ship. It's human. The words froze the room. Humans. Out here. Impossible. It had been over 30 years since the Empire signed the Border Accords, a treaty that kept humanity far from Imperial core space. The humans were supposed to stay on their side of the neutral zone, focused on their own expansion, and the Empire preferred it that way. Humanity had a reputation for unpredictability. The station commander, Captain Drellin, stared at the data. Run it again. Humans don't have the range to get here unnoticed. Relvar swallowed. Sir, I've run it 3 times. In the Imperial capital, the first report reached Admiral Varan's desk by encrypted channel. Unidentified vessel, approaching Varan sector. Suspected Terran origin. Varan almost laughed. The humans were troublesome traders and clever engineers. Yes, but they wouldn't risk sending a warship here. That would be a direct violation of the treaty. Still, there was a tightness in his chest he couldn't ignore. He sent a short order back. Track it. Confirm identity. Do not engage yet. On the Resolute, Ward moved slowly across the bridge, hands clasped behind his back. He could feel the crew's tension, even though no one spoke of it. They all knew the risk. The Empire had hundreds of warships stationed along this border. If they chose to intercept, things could turn ugly fast. But Ward wasn't here for battle. His ship was an experiment, a leap forward in human technology, powered by the new graviton core engines. It could cross Imperial sensors like a shadow, or, as today, appear boldly where no human vessel should be. Message from Earth Command, said Avery, handing him a data slate. The words were short. Continue, approach, do not deviate. Ward nodded once. Helm, maintain course. Let them come to us. On Varan 6, alarms finally began to sound. The vessel was now within half an hour of the border station's perimeter. Commander Relvar said urgently, if it keeps this trajectory, it will pass directly between our station and outpost, Jaren 2. Captain Drellin's jaw tightened. Send to High Command. Possible treaty violation. Prepare Border Fleet for interception. The crew moved quickly. Imperial patrol ships launched from their docks, fanning out to form a loose net. Out in the void, their engines glowed like fireflies from the Resolute's bridge. Ward could see them coming, tiny bright dots against the dark, multiplying with each passing minute. "They're sending an intercept group," Avery said. "Expected," Ward replied. His voice was steady, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Let's see how close they're willing to get." The tension in the air grew heavier. The crew worked with quiet precision, every console lit with tactical readout. No one spoke of fear, but it was there, a low hum beneath the disciplined silence. At Station Varen 6, Relvar couldn't shake a strange feeling. The ship wasn't weaving to avoid detection. It wasn't changing course to escape. It was coming, straight at them, like it wanted to be seen. And that scared him more than anything. In the Imperial capital, Admiral Varone received the second update. The tone of the report had changed. Confirmed. Vessel matches human design. No response to hails. Approaching with deliberate intent. Varen's hands clenched. If the humans were here by choice, it meant one thing. They had the capability to cross Imperial space without warning, and that was a possibility the Empire had never planned for. Captain Ward stood at the center of the Resolute's bridge as the first Imperial ships formed a line ahead. He studied them for a long moment, then turned to his crew. "Remember," he said softly, "we're not here to fire first." Avery nodded. "And if they fire first?" Ward's smile was small, almost sad. "Then they'll understand exactly why the Empire should have left us alone." Beyond the forward viewport, the Imperial blockade tightened. The stars seemed to grow colder. And still, the Resolute came on, silent, steady, unstoppable. The galaxy had just noticed, and it would never forget. The Imperial capital world, Varanus Prime, was never truly quiet. Its endless skyways hummed with traffic, and the towering spires of the High Command glistened under the pale light of the system's twin suns. Yet inside the secure war chamber, the mood was tense enough to silence even the most talkative officials. A single holographic projection hovered in the center of the table, a sleek, dark vessel moving through border space. The red Imperial tracking grid labeled it unidentified, possible Terran origin. Admiral Roth, Varen leaned back in his chair, trying to mask the unease that had been growing in his chest. "This could be a false reading," he said, his voice calm but measured. "The humans wouldn't dare violate the Accords." Across from him, Kira Mole, a young intelligence analyst, shook her head. "Sir, I've matched the gravitational signature to archived human prototypes. It's a warship, and it's not slowing down." Varen's eyes narrowed. Kira was new to the capital, but she had a reputation for sharp instincts. Prototype ships don't travel alone. If it's real, why send just one? "That," Kira replied, "is what should worry us. Hundreds of light years away, on the Resolute." Captain Elias Ward studied his own display, a slowly tightening ring of Imperial interceptors. "They're afraid," he murmured to Lieutenant Avery, "but not afraid enough to back away?" The crew sat in controlled silence. Most were veterans of deep space patrols, but none had ever faced the Empire directly. Ward could feel their questions unspoken. Why here? Why now? Earth Command's reasoning was simple. The Empire had grown. Complacent, certain that humans remain small players on the galactic stage. This mission would prove otherwise. One ship, sent boldly into their space, would shake the image of Imperial dominance without firing a single shot, at least. That was the plan. On the border station Varen 6, the officers were scrambling. Captain Drellin barked orders for more intercept. Craft to launch. Relvar, the senior technician, kept scanning the approaching vessel, trying to understand its design. "Sir," he reported, "their drive output is unlike anything in the registry. It's powerful, but the signatures, controlled. Minimal waste heat, no energy spikes." Drellin frowned, meaning, "It means, sir, they're not even trying. Whatever this ship can really do, We're not seeing it yet. The thought sent a shiver through the bridge crew. Back in the capital, Kira's data feed updated again. They've crossed the first border marker, she announced. To the room. Estimated arrival at Station Varen 6 in 30 minutes. The Emperor's Security Council members shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a stern-faced minister named Hyle Veros, spoke sharply. We should destroy it before it gets closer. A single ship can't survive against the Imperial fleet. Kira bit her tongue, but couldn't stay silent. With respect, sir. This ship wants us to think it's alone. If it came here, it's because they know something we don't. Varen shot her a warning glance, but he knew she was right. A single warship getting this close without detection was more than a breach. It was a message. The Resolute glided forward, ignoring every hail. Ward stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze steady. Imperial Intercept Group is closing, Avery reported. 3 frigates ahead, more incoming from port side. Ward's voice was calm. Maintain speed and heading. We respond only when necessary. He walked to the main viewport and looked at the distant specks of light, the Empire's warships, drawing near. In his mind, he imagined the confusion brewing in their command rooms. The whispered questions in their corridors. Who let a human warship get this close? On Station Varen 6, Captain Drellin's patience was wearing thin. Frigates, Sigma, and Vora's intercept and force a change of course. Repeat, force them to turn. The frigates adjusted course, spreading into a triangular formation. From the station's control room, they looked like tiny hunters see. In the emptiness of space, the 3 Imperial frigates moved like wolves in formation. Their engines burned with bright blue light, each one adjusting speed to match the intruder's path. From the control deck of Frigate Sigma, Captain Laris spoke into the secure channel, his voice sharp and certain. Target is ahead. This will be quick. He had chased smugglers before, driven pirates into surrender, even faced rebel fleets in the outer colonies. To him, this was just another job, a lone ship against the disciplined Imperial Navy. But Lieutenant Vero, his sensor officer, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Sir, their energy signature is stable. Too stable. Most ships adjust power output when we close in. This one, it doesn't care. Laris frowned. He didn't like that. Ships under threat always showed signs: overcharged shields, fluctuating engines, panic in their maneuvers. But the dark shape ahead just kept moving, calm as a drifting shadow. On the Resolute, Captain Elias Ward stood with his arms behind his back, watching the Imperial ships on the tactical screen. They formed a net ahead of us, reported Lieutenant Avery. Ward nodded. Let them. His voice carried no tension, only quiet confidence. The crew moved with practiced precision, no one raising their voice, no alarms blaring. For some, the calm was more unnerving than any combat drill. Sir, Avery asked carefully, should we prepare countermeasures? Ward glanced at him, a faint smile touching his lips. We already have. The question is, will they realize it before they commit to a mistake? At Station Varen 6, Captain Drellin watched the intercept unfold on his main display. Frigate, Sigma Vora's Talon, initiate a warning shot. Do not disable. I want them turning back immediately. The order went through, and in the depths of space, the 3 frigates adjusted their weapon arrays. But as soon as they tried to lock targeting systems, something went wrong. Captain Vero reported urgently from Sigma, weapons control. Just failed. Auto-calibration offline. We can't get a firing solution. On Vora's, the weapons officer shouted. Same here. Targeting refuses to register the vessel. Even Talon's captain cursed over the comms. What in the void is going on? The Resolute hadn't fired, hadn't even changed course. And yet, somehow, the frigate's systems were slipping into errors that no Imperial engineer could explain. Back. On the Resolute, Ward spoke quietly. Maintain course. Don't acknowledge their hails. Avery's eyes flicked to the readouts. Their targeting systems are glitching, but we're not jamming them directly. Ward gave him a knowing look. Sometimes, the best weapon is letting your enemy discover their own vulnerability. In the Imperial capital, Admiral Veran received a live feed with growing concern. "What's happening with the intercept group?" he demanded. Kiramo leaned over the console, her voice calm but firm. "It's not a malfunction, sir. The human ship is running a passive counterscan, projecting false gravitational echoes that confuse their targeting sensors." Varen's eyes narrowed. "That's advanced work. Our fleet tech can't do that without active jamming." Kira didn't look away from the screen. "It's worse, Admiral. They're not even trying to hide that they can do it." The Imperial frigates tried to reposition, surrounding the Resolute from all sides. Without warning, the human ship shifted its formation slightly, not enough to look aggressive, but enough to send a tightly coded signal into deep space. Still, at Varen 6's control room, caught the burst. "Sir, the ship just sent a narrow-beam transmission, encrypted. No idea who it's for." Drellin's face darkened. "If they're sending coordinates, it means more of them could be on the way." Ward stood still, watching the frigates dance around his ship. "They're testing us," Avery said quietly. Ward's answer was steady. "No, they're learning about us. And soon, they'll wish they hadn't." One of the Imperial captains grew impatient. "Sigma 2 unidentified vessel, this is your final warning. Alter course immediately, or be fired upon." Ward didn't reply. Instead, the Resolute glided forward another 2 kilometers, closing the gap to the blockade line. Inside frigate, Sigma's bridge, Captain Laris felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple. "Vero? Why haven't they stopped?" Vero's voice was quiet now. "Because, sir, they're not afraid of us." In the capital, Kira spoke into the silence of the war chamber. "If they came here to fight, they'd have fired already. This isn't an attack, it's a demonstration." Varen's jaw clenched. A demonstration of what? Kira met his eyes. That they can come this close anytime they want. The room fell silent. Even the hum of the holoprojectors seemed louder in the stillness. On the Resolute, Ward watched as the Imperial blockade held its position, weapons armed but unable to fire. He knew exactly what message was being sent, not just to the ships here, but to every Imperial system monitoring the event. Humanity was no longer distant. It could be at their doorstep, without warning. And this was only the beginning. The Imperial capital had grown restless. By now, every high-ranking official in the Security Council had heard the rumors. Some claimed the intruder was a rogue mercenary ship. Others whispered about forgotten Imperial prototypes, stolen decades ago. But when the latest scans came in from Station Varen 6, all doubt vanished. The ship's hull plating, weapon mounts, and unique energy field were unmistakable. It was human. Kira Mole stood before the vast holographic display in the intelligence chamber. The image of the warship rotated slowly, lines of Imperial data crawling across its dark surface. She pointed to the sharp prow and angular hull. "This matches the design of a vessel called the Resolute. It appeared in Terran prototype files 32 years ago, then vanished from all records." Admiral Varen leaned forward, his voice low. "Vanished." Kira nodded. The Terrans claimed the project failed, but clearly, it didn't. Around the table, the council members shifted uneasily. Minister Heil Veros slammed a hand down. "This is a treaty violation. We should strike immediately before more of them arrive." Varen's gaze stayed on the spinning image of the Resolute. He wasn't so sure. Destroying one ship might be easy, if they could catch it, but the fact it had reached this deep, into Imperial space, without detection meant humanity's capabilities had changed in ways they couldn't yet measure. Out near the border, aboard the Resolute, Captain Elias Ward listened to the silent hum of the bridge. The 3 Imperial frigates, still shadowed his ship, but none dared come closer than a few kilometers. Their weapons remained locked, yet unable to fire. Ward's comm officer turned to him. "We've intercepted Imperial transmissions, sir. They've confirmed our identity to High Command." Ward's eyes narrowed slightly. "Good. The first step of the message has been delivered. On Station Varan 6, Captain Drellin received. New orders from the capital. Do not engage unless fired upon. Maintain position until High Command sends further instructions." Drellin frowned. "We're letting them sit there, just beyond our guns." Ralvar, the senior technician, spoke quietly from his console. "Sir, maybe they're letting us sit here. Maybe they could be gone before we even blink." Drellin didn't answer. The thought was too unsettling to voice. In the capitals high tower, Kira watched the live feed intently. She noticed something strange. The warship had shifted slightly, not toward the Imperial blockade, but into a position that gave it a clear path deeper into Empire space. "Admiral," she said, quickly, "if they wanted to retreat, they'd be moving away. This is positioning for entry." Varen's fingers tapped on the table. "Entry to what?" Kira hesitated, then met his gaze. "Our heart. Back on the Resolute, Ward gave his crew their first direct order since entering Imperial space. Transmit. One message to the blockade," he said calmly. 4 words. Stand. Down. Avery raised an eyebrow. That's it, Ward replied. "Short messages are harder to misinterpret, and more difficult to ignore." The message went out. 4 words in perfect Imperial standard, crisp and clear. On Frigate Sigma, Captain Laris heard the transmission and felt a chill. "Stand down," he repeated aloud, as if trying to make sense of it. The words weren't shouted, weren't hostile, but they carried the weight of someone who had no reason to fear a fleet. Lieutenant Vero muttered under his breath. "He's not asking, sir. He's telling us." In the capital, the words echoed in the war chamber. Council members argued in sharp voices, some demanding immediate attack, others warning against rash action. Kira broke the noise. "If we ignore that message, we're admitting weakness. If we act against it, we risk finding out exactly what that ship can do. Either way, they hold the advantage right now." Varen's silence was telling. He finally spoke. "We'll need the Emperor's decision." Hours later, far above the planet's surface, in the private throne chamber of the Imperial Palace, the Emperor himself received the report. The description of the ship's arrival, its unshakable approach, and its simple, commanding message drew a slow frown across his face. "Prepare a secure channel," the Emperor ordered. "If this human wants to speak, I will hear him." Aboard the Resolute, Ward stood alone by the viewport, watching the Imperial fleet hold their uneasy line. He knew the next step would be the most dangerous and the most important. He had crossed their border not to fight, but to show the galaxy something it had forgotten, that humanity could appear anywhere, anytime, and no wall was high enough to keep them out. The void between the Resolute and the Imperial fleet was silent, but the silence itself felt heavy, almost alive. 2 forces stared at each other across that darkness. One, a single human warship with a calm, unshaken presence. The other, 20 Imperial vessels bristling with weapons they could not yet use. From the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Elias Ward studied the tactical display. Red markers, Imperial ships, formed a crescent ahead, blocking every direct route deeper into their space. Behind his own ship, the empty stars stretched endlessly, a path home, if he chose to take it. But Ward had no intention of turning back. "They've reinforced their line," Lieutenant Avery reported. "Admiral Varen himself is on the lead cruiser." Ward's voice remained calm. "Good. Let's speak to the man in charge." Aboard the Imperial flagship Valoran, Admiral Varen sat in his command chair, eyes fixed on the black silhouette of the Resolute floating in the distance. The human ship was motionless now. Engines at idle, yet its presence pressed against him like a weight. "Open a channel," Varen ordered. The connection lit up. On the main view screen, the face of a human appeared, middle-aged, composed. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the Terran ship Resolute," he said evenly. "I request a direct conversation with your Emperor." Varen straightened. "You have no authority to make demands in Imperial space. This is a restricted sector. You will surrender your vessel and crew for investigation." Ward didn't flinch. "Admiral, with all respect, you don't have the authority to accept my terms. Only your Emperor does." The air on the Valoran's bridge seemed to grow colder. Some officers glanced at each other, as if unsure they had heard correctly. On the Resolute, Ward turned slightly toward Avery and spoke just loud enough for him to hear. "He's proud, but he's listening. Pride slows decisions. Avery smiled faintly, and buys us time." Meanwhile, far away in the Imperial capital, Kira Mole sat at her monitoring station, listening to the live transmission. She could hear it in Ward's tone, no arrogance, just certainty. He spoke as if the fleet surrounding him was irrelevant. The council members argued behind her. Some called for immediate attack. Others urged patience until the Emperor gave the order. But Kira knew this wasn't just a standoff in space. It was a battle of nerves, and humanity was winning. Back at the blockade line, the Imperial ships inched forward, their weapons still locked on the Resolute. Inside Frigate Sigma, Captain Laris gripped the arms of his chair. "Why aren't they moving? Why aren't they doing anything?" he muttered. Lieutenant Vero answered quietly, "Because, sir, they don't need to." Ward's voice returned to the open channel. "Admiral, I have come here openly. No weapons fired. No cloaking. I wish to speak, not fight. If you want to prevent unnecessary misunderstandings, you will let me speak. To your Emperor." Varen's eyes narrowed. "And if I refuse?" Ward's reply was simple. "Then history will remember this as the day the Empire ignored its warning." There was no threat in his voice, yet the words carried an unshakable weight. For several long minutes, neither ship moved. Out beyond the blockade, the stars burned faintly, cold and distant. Inside both flagships, every breath felt measured, every heartbeat too loud. Ward stood unmoving at the center of his bridge, his crew silent around him. The Resolute's systems ran flawlessly, weapons armed but not aimed, shields steady, engines waiting for a single command. Across the line, the Imperial fleet shifted slowly in formation, each captain waiting for Varen's next order. None of them wanted to be the one to fire first. In the capital, the Emperor finally received Varen's private transmission. He listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. Then, at last, he said, "Hold your position. I will decide how this ends." The order reached Varen moments later. He looked at the image of the Resolute and, for the first time, wondered if humanity's boldness was more dangerous than any weapon. On the Resolute, Ward's officer announced, "No movement from their line, sir. They're holding." Ward allowed himself the smallest nod. "Good. They're starting to realize this isn't a battle they can win quickly." And so, the two forces remained, one fleet of many, and one ship alone. Between them lay an unspoken truth that both sides understood. If a single Terran warship could bring the Empire to a halt, then perhaps the galaxy was not, as the Empire believed. The standoff had stretched into hours. The Imperial fleet held its crescent formation, 20 ships locked in place, engines humming at ready power. The Resolute floated before them like a shadow that refused to be moved. Inside the Imperial flagship Valoran, Admiral Varen paced. "They're stalling," he muttered to his first officer. "We cannot allow them to sit here forever." "Sir," the officer replied cautiously. "Our orders are to hold position until the Emperor." "I know the orders," Varen snapped, though his voice softened almost immediately. "But a predator grows bolder if it senses hesitation. The Resolute, Captain Elias Ward, stood with his crew at full readiness. The air on the bridge was calm, but beneath the calm was something electric, the sense that the next action would decide everything. They're growing impatient, Lieutenant Avery observed, watching the sensor feed of Imperial fleet movements. Ward's eyes were steady. Good. Impatience leads to mistakes. But before they make one, he turned toward his operations officer. Prepare the graviton pulse. Minimum setting. Target the nearby moon. A few heads turned sharply at that order. The crew had trained with the graviton core, but using it here in front of the entire Imperial fleet would be like pulling the curtain back on a secret weapon, far away. The Imperial capital's war chamber was tense as ever. Kira Mole monitored the Resolute's energy output and frowned. Admiral Verone, we're seeing a strange buildup in their core. It's not weapons fire. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Minister Veros scoffed. Perhaps they are finally charging their cannons. Kira shook her head. No, this is something else, and I think they're about to show us. Back on the Resolute, Ward gave the order. Execute. A low thrumming vibration ran through the ship's hull, out beyond the bridge windows. Space itself seemed to shimmer faintly, as if a wave had passed through the stars. The pulse shot invisibly across the void, bypassing the Imperial ships entirely. It struck the small gray moon that hung in the distance, a barren rock orbiting a gas giant far behind the blockade. Slowly, impossibly, the moon began to move. On the Valoran's bridge, officers stared at their displays in disbelief. Sir, orbital shift detected, reported the sensor chief. That moon's trajectory, it's changing. Varen's voice was sharp. By how much? 2 degrees, and still increasing. It was subtle, but the implications were enormous. Every officer present understood the energy required to alter a moon's orbit, and this Terran warship had done it with a single, measured pulse. In the Imperial capital, the war chamber erupted in shouts. Minister Veros slammed the table. This is a provocation. They are threatening planetary bodies now. Kira, however, leaned forward, eyes fixed on the display. No. If they wanted to destroy it, they could have. This is precision. They're showing us control. Ward's voice came over the open channel, calm as ever. We came to talk, Admiral. If we wanted war, you wouldn't see us coming. His words settled into the ears of every Imperial captain on the blockade line. None of them doubted him now. On Frigate Sigma, Lieutenant Vero stared at the slowly drifting moon on his monitor. Sir, we can't match that kind of power. Not without an entire fleet's worth of resources. Captain Laris didn't answer immediately. His gaze was fixed on the black ship ahead. And they've just shown us they can do it whenever they choose. Back on the Valor, Varen opened a secure channel to the Emperor. You've seen what they can do, Varen said grimly. One ship, one pulse, and they altered a moon's path without harming a single Imperial vessel. If this is their way of asking for a conversation, I suggest we listen. The Emperor's reply came after a long pause. Very well. Prepare the channel. I will speak with this Captain Ward. On the Resolute, Ward received confirmation from his comm officer. Sir, the Emperor has agreed to open a secure transmission. Ward allowed himself the faintest smile. Good. Then the demonstration served its purpose. Avery looked at him curiously. And if it hadn't, Ward's gaze turned back to the drifting moon in the distance. Then we'd have given them a different lesson. In the Imperial capital, Kira Mole sat quietly, her mind racing. She knew this was more than a show of force. It was a statement of balance. The Empire had always believed itself untouchable, but this one human ship had just proven otherwise. And the galaxy, she thought, would never see the humans the same way again. The secure channel opened with a faint chime. On the Resolute's main screen, the image of the Emperor of the Galactic Empire appeared, a tall, silver-haired figure with sharp, calculating eyes. The imperial crest glowed faintly behind him, casting long shadows across the grand chamber. For a moment, neither man spoke. The silence itself was a test. Then the Emperor's voice filled the bridge, deep and controlled. "Captain Elias Ward of the Terran vessel Resolute. You have crossed into my space, breached a treaty, and disrupted my fleet. Explain yourself." Ward stood straight, hands clasped behind his back. "Your Majesty, I am here with a message, not as an enemy, but as a representative of my people. Humanity's reach has grown. We no longer remain behind the borders you drew for us decades ago. We will engage with the galaxy on equal terms, or not at all." The Emperor's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Equal terms. You arrive in my territory with a warship capable of altering celestial bodies, and you speak of equality." Ward's tone remained calm. "I did not come to demonstrate power for conquest, but to show you the reality of the balance between us. You cannot ignore us anymore, just as we will not ignore you." In the Imperial capital, the Security Council listened to the exchange in silence. Kira Mole sat forward, her heart pounding. She could feel the weight of Ward's words, not arrogance, but certainty. Minister Varos leaned toward Admiral Varen and whispered sharply, "This is a threat wrapped in polite words." Kira didn't turn her head, but spoke anyway. "It's an opportunity. He's offering the Empire a choice before conflict becomes inevitable." On the Valoran's bridge, Varen listened carefully. He had fought in border wars before, but this was different. Ward wasn't bluffing. He carried himself like a man who knew exactly what his ship and his people could do. The Emperor's voice came again, this time with a touch of curiosity. "And if we refuse your terms, if we close our borders tighter and forbid your kind from ever entering again?" Ward met his gaze without flinching. "Then we will respect your borders, until they no longer matter. Empires rise and fall, Majesty. Treaties change. What remains is how we choose to treat each other when the power to destroy is in both our hands." The bridge crew of the Resolute felt the tension in every syllable. These weren't just words. This was the heart of the mission. Kira, listening from the capital, could hardly breathe. She knew the Empire was proud, perhaps too proud to accept such direct truth from an outsider. But she also knew that Ward was speaking the one language the Emperor respected, strength without recklessness. The Emperor leaned back in his throne, studying Ward. "What exactly do you want?" Ward's answer was clear and precise. "Trade, technology exchange, diplomatic channels, and a mutual defense pact, one that ensures neither side will move against the other without cause. The galaxy grows more dangerous each year. We both know there are threats even your fleets would hesitate to face." A quiet murmur passed through the Imperial Council chamber. Some officials frowned. Others considered the possibilities. On the Valoran, Varen sent a quick glance to his aides. "He's offering alliance terms, without calling it an alliance," he said under his breath. "Smart." The Emperor's reply came slowly. "And what do the humans offer in return for these privileges?" Ward's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. "Access. We can go places you cannot. We can appear where your fleets cannot reach in time. The Resolute is not the only ship of its kind. Working together, we could secure trade routes, defend against common enemies, and ensure the stability of this part of the galaxy." For a long moment, the Emperor said nothing. Then, finally, he spoke. "I will consider your proposal, but do not mistake my willingness to speak for submission. The Empire bows to no one." Ward inclined his head slightly. "Nor does Earth, which is why we should stand side by side, rather than across the battlefield." The secure channel closed, leaving the bridge of the Resolute in a deep, thoughtful quiet. Avery broke it with a low voice. "Do you think he'll agree?" Ward's gaze stayed fixed on the now dark screen. "He'll agree enough to save face. The rest will come later." In the capital, Kira Mole leaned back in her chair, exhaling for the first time in what felt like hours. She didn't know if the Emperor would formally accept Ward's offer, but she knew one thing for certain. The Empire had just seen humanity not as distant traders or upstart colonists, but as a force worth negotiating with. On the Valoran, Admiral Varan watched the Resolute drift slowly in the starlight. He had the distinct feeling that history had just shifted course, and that whatever came next, it would not be the Empire's doing alone. The Resolute floated in the stillness of space, its black hull gleaming faintly under the light of distant stars. The tense hours of negotiation had passed, and the Imperial fleet still held its crescent formation, but their posture had changed. The guns remained armed, yet there was no longer the sharp edge of hostility in their positioning. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge, hands behind his back, looking at the tactical display. "Course plotted for withdrawal?" he asked. "Yes, sir," replied Lieutenant Avery. "Straight back across the border, same route we came." Ward gave a short nod. "Then let's move. Slow and deliberate. Let them see we're not running." On the Imperial flagship Valoran, Admiral Varen watched the Terran warship turn away. The movement was smooth, almost graceful, as if the Resolute were taking a final bow before leaving the stage. One of his junior officers leaned toward him. "Sir, do we follow?" Varen shook his head. "No, let them go. We've learned enough for now." But privately, Varen knew the truth. They hadn't learned enough at all. If one Terran ship could reach this deep into Imperial territory without warning, there could be others, already out there. Unseen. Far away in the Imperial capital, Kiramol received the live feed from the fleet. The moment she saw the Resolute begin its departure, she felt an odd mix of relief and unease. Relief, because the encounter had ended without bloodshed. Unease, because she understood this was not an ending, it was a beginning. She whispered to herself, "They came this far without fear, and they'll be back." As the Resolute moved past the outer edge of the blockade, Ward glanced at the comm officer. "Send a parting message to the Valoran. 6 words. The officer typed quickly and confirmed. "Message sent, sir. Will be in touch very soon." On the Valoran, the message flashed across Varen's console. He read it twice, his lips pressed into a thin line. Then, unexpectedly, he allowed himself a faint smile. "Bold," he murmured. "Very bold." The Resolute cruised on, leaving the Imperial ships far behind. Inside, the crew's tension slowly eased. Conversations began in quiet tones, relief mixed with pride. They knew what they had done today would be spoken of for years, perhaps decades. Avery walked up beside Ward. "Sir, do you think the Emperor will agree to our terms?" Ward's answer was measured. "He'll agree enough to keep us talking. That's all we needed. We don't have to win in a day. We just have to make sure they never underestimate us again." Hours later, the warship crossed back into neutral space. The border beacons blinked silently as they passed, recording the event in cold. Official logs, an unauthorized human vessel exiting Imperial territory. The report would be buried in layers of classified archives, far from public eyes. But among those who knew the truth, the event would never be forgotten. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor stood before a vast star map, his hands clasped behind his back. "They have ambition," he said softly to no one in particular, "and the means to pursue it." He turned to his advisors. "Prepare a diplomatic channel to the Terran leadership. Quietly. The public will see this as a gesture of strength, not concession." Kiramol, standing among the aides, felt a quiet satisfaction. Humanity had been underestimated for too long, and now, the galaxy's most powerful empire had been forced to acknowledge them. Back aboard the Resolute, the mood shifted from tension to quiet triumph. The stars ahead seemed brighter somehow, the void less cold. Ward stood alone at the viewport, watching the Imperial border fade into the distance. He knew this mission had been more than a show of force. It was a statement of identity. Humanity was no longer a minor player at the edge of the galaxy. They were a presence, a force, a future. Before leaving the bridge for a brief rest, Ward gave one last order. Begin preparations for our next mission. Different sector, different border. Avery raised an eyebrow. Another empire. Ward's faint smile returned. Another reminder. Far from the Resolute, deep in the Empire's opposite frontier, an empty stretch of space shimmered faintly. Another dark, angular warship emerged from the shadows, engines whispering. It drifted unseen past ancient listening posts and outdated patrols. Its course set for yet another capital that thought itself untouchable. The message was spreading. Humanity was here, and no one would ever again ask, who let a human warship get this close?